Hello everybody and welcome back to Operation Logistics, where in the last episode we just got to the point where we actually have ourselves like a whole lot of hexes to work with. Millions upon millions of hexes, because we can zoom in on each hex to 2 levels, which is kind of ridiculous. So this is going to be our lowest level of hex, and this is going to be how we're going to be determining, by and large, what is in a hex. Now, this is going to be primarily determined by what I'm calling buildings, but it's not necessarily going to actually be buildings. So if we go over to our sub-hex manager, I believe, we have ourselves our buildings here. And I'm going to go ahead and change this to be buildings, because I'm lazy and hard-coded. Okay, so we have our public enum buildings, and right now, we have no buildings. That's fine. In our sub-hex, let's go ahead and store a public buildings building. And that will store what type of building is on this hex. So overall, we have 2 categories of terrain. Well, 3 categories of terrain. Let me pop into here and I'll show it a little bit more clearly. So we have 3 categories of terrain. We have urban, rural, and water right now. And of course we have our height levels. Those are purely cosmetic. It's not really anything to be too worried about. So we have our 3 types here, and then within those we have nothing in water. Water just is. There are no subhexes in water. Inside of this, we've got ourselves these subhexes, and this is a rural area with a huge town, actually. This is a really big town for a rural area, but I suppose it's right next to an urban area. Maybe it's a suburb or something. And we've got ourselves a tiny bit of farmland up here, and a large forest. Those are our 3 biomes inside of inside of rural areas. And inside of rural or urban areas, we've got industrial over here. We've got a couple of residential areas up here, and we've got some commercial areas over here. So, the question now is, how many buildings per area do we need? Well, we need 1 type of building at least for every type of area. And that building type is road. So that will allow us to transport packages by truck, essentially. And there are a few other building types that are going to be similar to that. So we're going to need a few that can be built in multiple locations. Now, for some buildings, we're going to be needing a few things, but let me demonstrate again. I want to show what I'm exactly talking about here. So for example, say that you're building a rural airport, okay? Say you're out here, and you want to build an airport in this patch of forest, okay? So you purchase this patch of forest, and you go here, and all of this territory inside of the forest is then yours-ish, if you purchased the whole hex. But ultimately, you'll probably be purchasing on this level. But you can go ahead and purchase territory here. If you want to set up an airport, what's the minimum you would need? Well, you would need, say you wanted to set up an airport over here, okay? Minimum you would need would be a hangar, a tower, or a control tower, and then a runway, which would probably be 3. So for airports, that's what you'd need. So we can go ahead and add that in. So I'm going to put that up here, and we're going to say airport structures. So these are structures that are player created. So we would need runway, we would need hangar, and we would need control tower. There we go. Okay, so let's open up our quasi-design document here and take a look at what exactly we've got going on here. So, what type of facilities do we have? Airports, ports, trucks, and trains. So we've got airports covered. What do we need for ports? Well, for ports, that indicates that our sub-hexes will need to know whether they're actually adjacent to water or not. So, like, for example, we would need some shore hexes inside of, well, probably not here because of the cliff, but maybe here. But certainly, like, for example, this should have shore hexes down here, realistically. So that's going to be interesting. However, what actual structures do we need for a port? Well, we certainly need docks. I think we need... Well, we need a dock. Each dock would be similar to the hangar, where the hangar would be able to store like one plane at a time. One plane would be able to operate out of that. The runway would have limited capacity. The control tower would probably just need upgrades or something like that, but runways would have limited capacity. You'd need hangar space. Similarly for ports, you'd need dock space. You'd probably... We would probably need a... something like a loader crane for each dock that would then allow it to move to warehouse space. And that warehouse space can be used for kind of... Well, it's not really warehouse, though. It's more shipping container storage, where they are put when they come off the boat and then need to be transported elsewhere. So I guess we'll call that storage. I'll call it shipping container. There we go. Now I know exactly what we're talking about there. So there's our port structures. Now then, what else do we need? We need our trucking facilities. So a truck depot. Truck depot. Structures. What do we need for a truck depot? Well, we probably need something along the lines of... Well, is fuel a concern in this game? That's a good question. I think for right now, fuel is not an issue. We can always add fuel in later. I just want to make this be a little more manageable here. As it is right now, we've got a lot of things on our plate that we need to do. So, actually, down here, we've got road. Let's go with railroad. And then warehouse. So these are all player structures. Player constructed structures. And then down here we will do NPC structures. Okay. So with that in place, another thing I would like to check, actually. Oh no, I'll get to that later. So, truck depots, what are we going to need for them? Well, we'll need trucks. But those would probably just come along with depot bays, whatever I want to call those. I'm not sure what you call it for trucks. And then we would also need railroad depot structures. And then the question is, can we build our own roads and railroads? I think we probably can. I don't see an issue there. So we would need road, railroad, warehouse, sorting facility. What else would we need? Well, let's check our document here. We need to pick up the parcel, identify where it's destined, transport to that location, deliver. Okay. So truck depots are more for like overland shipping. They aren't really for pickup or delivery. So we should also consider having ourselves pickup, delivery, depot structures. Okay. Something along the lines of that. So as far as player-constructed structures go, this is pretty bare bones as far as things we can actually build. Roads, railroads, warehouse, sorting facility, airport structures here, port structures, I think those port structures are fine. The ports will work largely like the airports. Truck depot, railroad depot, pickup delivery depot. That's what we need to be working on right now. We've also, of course, got NPC structures, and these will be per biome. So let's go ahead and say per biome. Helps if my hands are on the right keys. Okay, so per biome. So let's go for... There are no NPC structures on water, okay? So let's go for urban first. And then we're going to go for residential, commercial, industrial, and then rural. That's not how you spell. That's how you spell. Forest, farmland, town. Okay. So, what sort of housing do we want to have? Well, there are a few different types, and some of these might actually be shared. Maybe not, though. Maybe we don't want to have straight-up houses in the urban areas, and we want to keep those to town. So something like house, and then we'd have like a basic business, basic industry. So like, for example, a basic business would be a small town business that you'd come across, you know, like a restaurant, like a diner sort of thing, or a bar, or, for example, like, yeah, something along those lines. A basic industry would be something along the lines of, say, a logging facility, or perhaps even like a car mechanic, something along those lines. So that would be what makes up houses, or makes up towns. General stores, things like that, in a basic business. And we can have a few different variants of each type if I feel like making a bunch of models. Maybe. I'll probably do it eventually. Especially considering that I would eventually like to sell this game, if it's possible. But that's one of the reasons why I'm doing it on the channel, because that gives me a lot of good reasons to finish it. However, for farmland, what are we going to need? Well, obviously we are going to need fields. So these are like, you know, cornfields or barley fields or crabgrass. What? I don't know. Crabgrass is probably not something farmers grow. Who knows? I'm not a farmer. Anyway, they will grow things in the fields. And then they will have their own, like, I guess we could say barn. So field might be, it might be animal-based, it might be plant-based. These are mostly cosmetic things, and we can add those in as random generation or whatever. So field, barn, and then the third thing would probably be something along the lines of farmhouse, which we would be most interested in. Most of our deliveries would be to the house. We don't care so much about the field or the barn or anything like that. And interestingly, with the farmland, most of that, we'd probably not even do the Voronoi generation for that, because we'd probably just set up field as the default, and then just dot in houses and barns clustered together a little bit. Something along those lines. Okay, so for the forest, I mean, it's just forest, clearing, and I don't know. That's kind of it. There is one more section that I want to set up. It's not strictly structures. Of course, forest isn't strictly structures either. I guess we could say, like, I think forest and clearing is enough for just forest. It's mostly just very desolate areas, and we don't really care about it so much as far as we're the player concerned. But the third section that I want to set up is geographic structures. And this will include things like river. Perhaps even stream. I think that's a little too small for what we're looking at in terms of scale. We're looking at pretty wide scales here. So river will be a pretty important thing. Other geographic structures. Because a river can kind of go through anything, and so we'll need to generate the geography first. Well, river, shore, that'll be an important thing for our port creations. What else are we going to be needing? I think that's good for now. So river, shoreline, things like that. So we're going to need to be able to know, at least at the world level. We're going to need to snake rivers through. That's going to be a little bit awkward with the way we're procedurally generating everything. Maybe I don't want rivers. Let's just get rid of river for now. We can always add it later. Let's have shore for now. And then forest, clearing, field, barn, farmhouse, house, basic business, basic industry. Okay, so NPC structures. Residential. Obviously, we want to have something like apartment complex. Maybe we'll go for like duplex as a lower density. It's not super low density like out in the rural areas, but it's much lower density, as in 2 families rather than 1 million in an apartment complex. So what else do we need in a residential district? I mean, obviously there's going to be roads that generate through and such. I don't know. And then we can have like standard road connections. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking right now as far as road connections go. I just had this idea and I want to get it out and make sure that we are on the same page here. So look at this. We have this outcropping of 3 on each side. Like that. What if we procedurally generate the roads internally, but always have them have a connection at the center one? So that way we always know where the roads will be, but then we can generate them kind of randomly inside, and then just snake them through, maybe. That could be interesting. So, apartment complex, duplex. What else do we need in a residential area? Well, I mean, we could theoretically have, like, larger houses. You know, like a more wealthy area. That's a possibility. We'll go with, like, upscale housing. Sure, that'll work for now. Can always change this later. Okay, so under commercial, and that's not how you spell commercial at all. That's a little bit better. Okay, so under commercial, first thing that we probably want to consider is, what about something that is just very, very high volume for us? Like, for example, what if we had an e-commerce sort of business that was operating within this particular city, and they need to ship a huge number of packages? So let's call that, and that is not, hang on. Let's do that. I'm happier now. Okay, so let's call this a warehouse. Now we already have our own warehouse, but let's just call that sorting facility. Let's consolidate those together. So this is a commercial warehouse. They have a large amount of things going in and out all the time, and they need to move it. So they're probably going to be good customers for us. Other things that we could have would be like a mall, which wouldn't necessarily be a good customer for us. But what other sort of urban urban style commercial things do we want? like storefront type things, possibly. Let's go with, yeah, let's do that. Let's go with a storefront. Okay, so that's good for commercial. And then for industrial, what do we want there? Well, manufacturing facilities often require raw resources being brought in and then ship out the results. I'm not sure how much they would contract a service like ours, but that's something we can research. So let's go with like manufactory, or actually just simply factory. What else do we want? Perhaps something along the lines of... I'm now blanking. Well, what else do we want other than factories? And we can have different types of factories, but I don't want it to be just factories in an industrial area. So I'm actually going to do a quick Google here. What sort of buildings are industrial? List of building types on Wikipedia. Industrial buildings. This looks useful. Brewery, factory, foundry, winery, distillery, mill, refinery. Warehouse is actually classified as industrial, but I'm going to keep that under commercial. Okay, so we could do, for example, I would probably consolidate brewery and winery into one, but let's go ahead and go with brewery. I realize they're not exactly the same, but similarly, I would probably consolidate factory and foundry. We could do mill. Refinery, I would consider probably as part of factory as well. And then warehouse and workshop. Let's go with mill. It could produce foodstuffs, things like that, and brewery would produce liquid foodstuffs that would potentially require, like, refrigerated tankers or something. That could be interesting. Okay. So, as far as truck depot structures go, we would need essentially a berth, which the dock operates as for the port and the hangar operates as for the airport. And then we'd be able to set what type of vehicle we want coming out of this berth. The railroad depot would work a little bit differently, and pickup delivery would work a little differently probably as well. I don't know fully how that would work quite yet, but I'm working on that. We haven't gotten much actual programming done here, but this enum is becoming pretty extensive, and we're going to have to create each of these building types. And actually, we can probably consolidate clearing into none, but maybe I want to keep it as clearing. Geographic structures being shore is fine. Okay, so I'm just going to right now call this a truck berth. That's not the correct term, but I'm too lazy to look it up. If you know the correct term, feel free to correct me, and here in a few episodes, I'll probably get around to changing it. Okay, so we've got a truck berth, and what else does a truck depot actually need? Well, not a lot, actually. A truck depot would need, like, a staging area where it would be able to turn, where it'd be able to take from one truck, temporarily store it, and then load it onto another truck. Ideally, very temporary. So we've got a truck berth, a staging area, and then what else would we need? Maybe we do go with a fueling station. However, yeah, I think it's fine to have fueling stations be kind of quasi-unique to trucks. Airports are controlled by where they can go, airport to airport only. Ports are controlled by where they can go, port to port only. Railroads are controlled by where the railroad goes. I mean, truck depots are controlled by where the roads go, but there will be a lot more roads. So, we'll need to be able to figure out how exactly we want to do this. Because we're going to have, for railroads, we're going to have quite a few of the same... Like, we're the same train is going to have different types of cars, right? So we're going to need to be able to differentiate a bit. I think each train will require a quasi-berth because I like that concept. So for now, we'll call it a train berth. It's not a good term, but that's what we're going for. And then we will need a actual railroad depot, which is where you take the items to load them onto the train. And then we would need something along the lines of a car manager. And I'm not sure how exactly we would do that. Are we able to have more than one train on the same section of track? Are we able to... Is there track to begin with, or do we have to build the track? If we have to build the track, I think it's fine to have one train on the same section of track only. And if you want to have more trains, you either add more train berths to add engines and add more cars, or you build another railroad. So instead of train berth, we'll call this engine berth. So you need one berth for each engine that you can have. The engines then link together and can each pull a finite number of cars. And then we would need some sort of a structure that would allow us to add cars to the train and manage the train's actual structure. So for now, we'll call that a structure, a train car manager. We'll have to change that eventually. And then as far as pickup and delivery goes, this would be relatively simple. All we would need is a delivery car berth, or actually just a car berth, because they would do pickup and delivery. A car berth, they would need a quasi-sorting facility. It wouldn't need to be a huge one, but it would... Actually, I think that would be... Would that be where we'd do sorting? Maybe we could have a low-efficiency sorting facility there that just determines the area it goes to or something. Maybe. And then the last thing that we would probably need here would be something along the lines of... And we can just call this a... I suppose we could call it a postal office. There we go. And then the last thing that we would need for a pickup delivery depot would be something along the lines of... What? I think that pretty well covers it, actually. So I think we only need 2 for pickup delivery. Well, that's a lot of structures we're going to need to implement. Each of them will be generating or requesting particular packages. Well, each of them... Some of the end destinations will occasionally request packages, and then those will be shipped by commercial and industrial areas to their destinations. But anyway, it is time to put a cut in here, but I'm very glad we got those buildings hammered out. So, next episode, we will see about maybe starting to implement them a little bit. See you all then.